Today is Thursday, September 18th, 2014, and this is the beginning of an interview with Mr. Ernie Hopkins at the Rutherford B. Hayes Presidential Center in Fremont, Ohio. Ernie is 63 years old, having been born on October 30th, 1950. My name is Julie Miley, Manuscripts Assistant at the Hayes Center, and I will be conducting the interview. Ernie, can you state for the record what war, branch of service, and the years that you served?
I was in Vietnam. I was in Charlie Company, 5th to the 46th Infantry Division, Markel 23rd. I also was the 1st to the 14th Artillery that was attached to the 5th to the 46th. And I was there from July of 1970 until September of 1971. My actual days of service was from February 17th until September 22nd of 1971.
Okay. Now, when you were in the military, were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted. That's the year that they had the lottery, and my number, I believe, was number 34. So I knew when they pulled the lottery that I didn't have a choice, but I was going to go.
You're going. Do you know how they assign those numbers? Like how you got that? Like, how did you get that number 34? You know what I mean? Like.
Well, what they did, they took 365 days out of the year.
Okay.
And they put that on a ball, and they put it in the drum, and they had somebody just pull it out like what we do the lottery today. And when the ball come out and it said, October 30th, that was your number, was number 34. And so maybe the next number out would have been September 2nd or, who knows what, all the way up through the 365 days that they pulled. And that's how the lottery worked to get drafted back then.
Really? Because I've asked that question a few times for the other ones that have been drafted, and they couldn't remember like how they, I don't know why or how it happened, but.
Yeah, they did it on TV. They did it in December, and on YouTube you can actually find that.
Really?
You can research that, and I watched that once on YouTube where they had a little thing about the draft lottery, and that would have been in 1969.
Okay.
And I know we sat there in the living room when they was doing it and watching it, because at that time I was 19 years old, and I knew that the war was still going on and what my choices was going to be. And when they pulled that out, I knew right then that I didn't have any choice, that I was going to go. And I got my draft notice about 2 weeks later, and they gave me about 3 weeks before I had to report. And so on February 17th, 1970, I left for Cleveland, Ohio, to be inducted into the Army.
Now, where were you living at the time?
I was living in Port Clinton.
Okay. And were you just working? You had probably just graduated, so were you working or school or?
I'd graduated and I was working at a factory called U.S. Gypsum.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And the ironic thing was that when I got drafted, we had to go to downtown. There was a bus that was coming to pick up all the people who was drafted on that day to leave. And I was the only one from Port Clinton that left. And when I got on this bus, it had come from Fremont. And from Fremont, I believe it had come from Woodville to Fremont to Port Clinton. We stopped in Sandusky, we stopped in maybe Vermilion, maybe Elyria, and then up to Cleveland. So when I got on the bus, I didn't know anybody and didn't know anybody for the rest of the time. It's just one of those, I boarded the bus by myself. And they told me, says, bring the minimum stuff with you that you need. And if you need anything, we will supply it. And so I had on my oldest shoes, my oldest pants, and this was in February, so I had on a coat, my oldest coat I had, And when I got to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, which was a day and a half later, they gave us our uniforms, and they said, if you want to send this stuff home, it's going to cost you this much money, or there's a dumpster. So I threw all my stuff away and went straight military then.
Really?
Yes. And going into the military, like I went when I was everything wasn't free, because we were only allowed to bring, I think it was $20 with us. And sure enough, the very first thing in there was a haircut, and that cost $1. And no choice in how it was going to be, but I had to pay for my very first haircut in the Army, and I paid for my haircuts the whole way through. They never cut my hair for free. You would have thought that the very first haircut going in, that it would be free, but no.
Yeah, usually they just line you up. There's like, bzz, get out of the chair, bzz, get out of the chair.
That was it. It was civilian barbers.
Yeah.
That was cutting it in Fort Campbell, and there was a big long line. You know, I mean, God knows how many people's in that line. And you just went in, and every now and then they would take a broom and sweep the hair over in the corner. It'd be enough to fill 55-gallon barrels. Because at that time, you know, there was a lot of long hair, a lot of ponytails, a lot of whatever. And everybody come out looking the same. All for $1.
So you said you were down in Fort Campbell?
Fort Campbell's where I took my basic training at.
Okay. Do you remember that? Was it sort of a culture shock for you?
When we first got into the reception center, and you know, it was one of those things where it was yelling, you know, come on, hurry up, move, let's go, come on, move. And we got our uniforms and we got everything, and they loaded us up with everything that we had to have and threw it into our duffel bags. And it was a constant run. You never walked any place. You ran. And when you walked out the door of the building, you were running. And if you was carrying your duffel bag, you was running. You know. And it was just, you know, yelling and screaming, you know, get moving, you know, and make sure that your buttons are buttoned and your collars are down and your pants are bloused. And so it was, at that time, it was kind of hard to realize what was going on. But later on in my military service, I could see what it was. It was the training part of it. It was where they broke you down, where they made you a team member instead of an individual.
Exactly.
Because there was a lot of individual people that went in there with their own attitude, and their attitude didn't get it. They needed to be on the same attitude as the team. And that's what the basic training did for us. You know, they broke us down and then rebuilt us into the soldiers that we were.
So was there any funny incidences, or do you remember anything fondly, or was it more of was it 8 or 6 weeks, or what did you do?
I did 8 weeks.
Did you do 8 weeks?
Well, really it turned out to be 9, because if you don't get started till Tuesday, Monday is the start of the week, not Tuesday, so I ended up being there 9 weeks.
Really?
Yeah. The one thing I do remember about it was that our first sergeant's name was Johnson, and there was a kid that was in our platoon by the name of Johnson, and we had exercise we had to do before every meal, and we had to do the ladder walk, you know, where the ladder is strung between 2 poles, and you grab the rungs and you go, and they still have it at playgrounds today. Well, we'd have to go down it and sometimes back. Well, Johnson could only make about 2 of them. Well, the first sergeant found this out, that there was a Johnson who couldn't do it, and he rode him. He would get him up there first. Johnson would have to go through. He was a big, heavy guy from Tennessee, I think it was, and he would ride him and make him go, and he would sometimes have to do it 3 or 4 times before he could ever eat. And at the very end of it, the probably about in the 7th week, he was able to complete it and go all the way to the other end. And the first sergeant was there when he went all the way through, and he come down and he goes, I knew I was going to make a soldier out of you, troop. And he goes, now, he says, come to the head of the line. He says, and from now on, he says, you will eat at the head of the line. So for the next, however long we were there, Johnson was at the front of the line to eat first.
Wow.
And he still had to do the exercises, but he was there. So that was one of those things, because if he couldn't do it, well, we all had to do it, you know, and he was dragging the team down, but the first sergeant stayed on him, and the rest of us didn't get punished, but we kept saying, come on, Johnson, you can do it, come on, Johnson, you can do it, do it, do it, do it, you know. And when he finally got it done, it was really rewarding.
As a team to see that, yeah.
As a team to see it, to see the accomplishment.
Wow,
And
that's cool.
have no idea whatever happened to him or where he went to after that. Never seen him, heard of him, don't even know what his first name is. It's just Johnson.
That last
he was
name.
gone. Yep.
Okay. So after your basic training, where'd you go after that?
After basic, I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma,
Okay.
which is home of the artillery, and I was being trained to be a artilleryman or a cannon cocker.
Okay.
And there was a lot of National Guard being in the military at that time, because a lot of guys, instead of joining the Army or joining the Navy or joining whatever, they would join the National Guard, because National Guard wasn't going overseas at that time to fight. So we had in our battery, and basic training, it's called a company.
Okay.
When you get to artillery, it's called a battery. So in our battery, we ended up having about 25 of us that was U.S., which is regular Army, and then the rest of them were National Guard. So they come around and they said, who can drive truck? Well, you've always heard this thing that don't ever volunteer for anything and don't ever say anything, you know. So I held my hand up and says, all right. I says, I know how to drive. And so he says, we need 6 more drivers. And so they finally got 6 more drivers, all out of the U.S., not the National Guard. And they made us truck drivers. So I drove the explosives for the artillery rounds, the detonators, and the other guys pulled the holisters when we went to the ranges. And the nice thing about that was, whenever it was chow time or meal time, truck drivers to the front of the line.
Really?
Truck drivers ate first, because then they were transported to the motor pool to pick the trucks up to get back to the battery to pick up the troops to take them out for training. And so, you know, I always heard about how everything always had to be GI'd and everything. Well, my truck was always full of explosives, so it was always locked up at night in another compound. So it never got worse like it should. At the end of my 7th week in training in Fort Sill, they turned around and he said to me, he says, okay, he says, unload the truck, take all the explosives off of it, we're going to take the truck back and clean it. And I looked at it, and Oklahoma was full of dust and mud, and I thought, oh man, you know, because I was just driving around the back of fields. I thought, I want to be out here forever cleaning this thing, because they actually had horse racks to put the trucks on. So I drove up to it, and they turned around and they said, looked to her and says, Hopkins, get your stuff out of the truck that's yours and let's go. I said, well, what about cleaning it? He goes, that's what the National Guard's going to do. We got something better for you to do.
Really?
I said, really? And they says, yep, we just posted our orders. So we posted our orders for our next duty assignment, and my duty assignment was Vietnam. So then I went into a week of training
Oh my gosh.
they had a little miniature Vietnam set up in there to show what to look for and stuff like that. So I went from truck driving into Vietnam training. I would rather clean the truck, I think.
Yeah, he said I got something better. I'm thinking, that ain't better. No. Oh my gosh.
But it was another one of those luck of the draws because of every battery, so many had to go to Vietnam. And my battery had about 100 people.
Okay.
So we'll use the numbers. If we had 100 people, we had 75 people as National Guard and 25 U.S. Well, we knew the U.S. was going to Vietnam. And all of us went to Vietnam except for 2 who went to jump school.
Really?
And then they went to Vietnam. And so, but anyway, that's what happened in my basic then.
So then, a week later, you were, like, how soon did you go to Vietnam after that?
After I graduated AIT in Fort Sill, I was awarded a leave to come home for 13 days.
Okay.
So I come home for 13 days, and I left on July the 8th. I left Cleveland and flew to Oakland, California, and stayed all night and went to Fort Ord, California, and my time started that day, so it started on July 9th, that I was assigned to Vietnam.
Okay.
And within about 3 hours of being at Fort Ord, I was on an airplane heading for Anchorage, Alaska. Got off at Anchorage, Alaska for just a short while. From there, then it was Okinawa, Japan. From there, it was Bien Hoa, Vietnam. And so I spent the first week in Vietnam and Bien Hoa being processed and doing more training before I actually was sent to my duty assignment then.
Do you remember when you first set foot down there in Vietnam?
Yes.
What that felt like?
I still can smell it.
Really?
And I still can feel it. When they opened up the doors on that airplane, the heat just come rolling in, and you couldn't breathe. It was just like somebody put a bag over your head, and you couldn't. It was hard to breathe, and then once you got out of the airplane, they put us on a bus to take us to the processing center. And on the bus, it had bars on the windows, and the bars were not to keep us in, but to keep grenades from being thrown in the bus. And the smell, the stench was just, I still can smell it today. And I still can feel the heat today. And until we actually got to the base where we unloaded, and we were given probably about 24 hours to adjust to the temperature before we were, because this was July, and when I was in San Francisco, it was 56 degrees. Got to Anchorage, Alaska, and it was in its higher 30s, they said. I have no idea what it was in Japan. And got to Vietnam, and it was 110 degrees. And so, it took they gave us a day to adjust ourselves before we started getting into the heavier training.
Wow.
And so you just started sweating, and you sweated the whole time through.
I was going to ask you, did you have any siblings at the time?
No.
You didn't have it. Okay, I didn't know if you had other brothers that were going to be drafted or anybody else in the military.
No, I'm the only child.
Okay. That kind of makes it even harder on the parents.
Yes, it did.
Okay. So after you guys got acclimated and you got your assignments, what'd you do?
After all that kind of come together in Bien Hoa, then they put us on a Army transport plane, which is a C-130. and flew us north to Chulai, which is about 90 miles south of Da Nang. And when I got off there, once again, I had never made any friends or contacts with anybody. Just, you just sit down at a table and you eat, and you get up and you go wherever they tell you to go to. I mean, it wasn't like you had any pals or buddies or anything.
It wasn't like a high school clique where you ate at the right lunch table. You just kind of did your stuff and.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
And so when I got to Chulai, then they gave me a building. It says, go sit in that building and wait for us. Don't leave. And so I sat in the building for about 6-7 hours, and then they finally come and got me, and it says, okay.
Really?
It says, we'll take you in, we'll process some more stuff. So at that time, then I was issued my M16 and my field gear. Then I was sent back to the same room or same building, and nighttime came, and we was able to go eat and stuff like that. But they didn't want us away from that building. We could go outside. It's not like we had to sit inside, but there's nothing outside to see except for sand and heat, and inside there's nothing but heat. So anyway, they put me on a Jeep and they took me outside of the gate to a fire base called it was LZ Bayonet.
Okay.
Go sit in this building and wait. So for 3 days I was there waiting in this building. Didn't have to do anything, didn't have to do any guard duty or anything, but it was just waiting. And then all of a sudden they turn around and says, okay, get your stuff and we'll be here to get you. And they took me to a helipad. I said, well, where are we going now? He says, we're going to make you a radio operator. I says, I have no idea anything about radios. Don't worry. We'll teach you. They will teach you. The only thing you got to do is carry it. So pretty soon this helicopter sit down, and he said, they motioned for me to get on the helicopter. I got on the helicopter, and that's the last I saw LC Bayonet. I left. And I went flying. I flew out into the jungles.
Oh my God.
And I looked down, the helicopter went turning. There was a pile of yellow smoke coming up out of the thing because they'd popped smoke for the landing zone. And I got off the helicopter and went in, and they said, okay, I saw a guy and he was motioning for me to follow him. So I followed him, and he goes, your replacement? I said, supposed to find Lieutenant Timberberg. I said, all right, I'll show you where he's at. And he was laying over with the company commander. I believe they were playing cards. So I come in, being that they were officers, and come up and gave them a real, how do you do, salute, as firm as I could be. And they just looked at him and says, hey there, we don't do that out here. Go find some place and sit down and wait.
Again.
So that was and then I was in the infantry, and so that was the whole start of my whole career. I never ever worked on artillery as far as firing any of the Holisters or loading any of the Holisters or even touching the Holister. I had all that training on how to do it, but I never did it.
Really? They find a different purpose for you?
They found a different purpose for me.
Wow. Okay. While you were over there, did you write letters home? Did you receive letters, packages, anything like that?
Oh yeah, I always wrote a lot of lying letters home.
Did you?
And I always looked at it. It wasn't so much lying, but I just didn't tell a lot of truth. Hi Mom, hi Dad, everything's fine and dandy. Boy, it sure is hot over here. And I've got a good job. I'm a radio operator. Got to go talk to you write again soon. And because our mail was free going out, it didn't cost us anything. So being an only child, I was constantly sending stuff back. And they never knew I was ever in the infantry. You
never told them?
Never told them. No, I was able to hide it from till I got back.
Really?
And and I'd send them, you could write on anything and send back. I'd rip off the ends of C rations and write on a piece of cardboard and send that off to them, And
really?
Then we started numbering our letters, because if I could remember what number it was I just sent, so if I sent like number 48, I would, next would be 49, because sometimes I'd be talking about something and Mom started doing the same thing. Because Dad never wrote, Mom always did all the writing. Mm-hmm. And so she would start numbering the letters coming back, and sometimes I'd get letter 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, then 11.
Okay.
And because some of the stuff wasn't making any sense, so we started a numbering system.
That's smart.
And so I thought, well, okay, that worked out. That worked out pretty good. So for the whole time until I got out of the infantry and ended up on some fire pit. And I never sent any. I sent some pictures home, but they were always pictures of me in the rear and looking good, in all uniform. I never sent anything home of me being in the bush or anything like that. No need making them worry.
No, because they were already worrying, so.
Yeah, they was already worrying.
You don't need to add to it. Oh. Okay. Did you carry anything over there while you were there, as far as for good luck, or did you wear anything, did you carry a Bible, anything like that?
We had the small testaments, the New Testament that they passed out, and most of us in the bush had something. I mean, we had beads that we wore. We had peace emblems that we wore. There really wasn't too much Army restriction about that out in the bush. We wore headbands, kind of like what you would see Rambo wear. And we also didn't wear. We didn't wear full uniforms. We had sleeveless T-shirts. We were the originators of the cargo shorts, because we would take our pant legs and cut them off just below our side pockets. And so we had cargo shorts. And so as far as good luck stuff, I suppose the only thing I wore constantly was my dog tag. I had one around my neck and one in my right boot. And I still have my beads I wore over there, my peace emblem, my headband,
Really?
my dog tags, and my right boot.
Really?
Yeah, I got a lot of stuff that I sent back in. But as far as anything good luck, some people always had maybe a rabbit's foot that might have been attached on a rifle or something like that. But no, I never really did.
Okay. So did you guys ever come into direct contact with any of the Viet Cong?
Yes, we did. My first day out, I flew out and I got into the company, and the next morning we got back on the helicopters and we flew back to Chulai. I left LZ Bayonet, flew out into the bush. Next day we got on helicopters and flew back into Chulai. And when I flew back into Chulai on the helicopter, there wasn't any seats, because I was sitting, when I flew out the first time, there was a fold-down seat and I sat in the middle of the helicopter. come back the next time, I flew in the door of the helicopter with my legs hanging out because we had about 11 or 12 guys on there. Mm-hmm. And that was quite the ordeal, quite scary. We were back for 3 days and to regroup and everything. And then they took us back out, and by that time I'd had my full rucksack with all my radio equipment and everything I had to carry. Mm-hmm. And I weighed about 130 pounds, and my rucksack weighed about 125 pounds. Oh, and then I had my pistol belt and my M16 and my steel pot, which is my helmet. So they took us out and they dropped us off, and we started walking towards a mountain line. And so we walked through a bunch of sand. We got to this mountain hill, was what you could call it, kind of sort of around this area. And we started up on top. And when we started up on top, when we got up there, we stopped, and this other platoon was coming by us to do a perimeter. Mm-hmm. And this black guy got within about a foot of me and looked me right dead in the eye and nodded at me. And when he turned around after nodding at me, he turned like this, and I turned to look the other way, and we hit a landmine. And when it hit the landmine, he was standing in front of me. And it blew his chest up, knocked me over. When I got up, I turned around and looked, and he was laying there, and he was pumping blood out. I was able to take my fingers and stick into his holes and stop him from bleeding until the helicopters could get there. We lost 6 that day that got killed and about 28 wounded. And so I never knew the guy's name. And only thing I knew, he was a black guy. Mm-hmm. And so I threw him on the helicopter with a couple other guys that helped me. And away he went. And that was July 30th of 1970. And that was my first contact. And I'd only been in country since July 9th. I'd only had, because I figured this out later, 22 hours in the bush. That's all I'd ever been in the bush when we hit this landmine. And I thought he was dead, because when they come back and they said about those 6 that got killed, there was 5 Americans and 1 of our Carson scouts got killed. And so they said it was a black guy that died. Well, I knew it was him. And but he had saved my life. 1999, and St. Louis, Missouri. Went to a reunion. This black guy come. He said, "It's Jesse Hill." I said, "I had no idea who it is." And he says, "He's the guy that was in that landmine incident." That's now he died. Went up and Jesse is there, and he says, "I don't know you." I said, "Well, I don't know you either." And I says, "The only way I know you is that you had a bunch of holes in your chest."
Wow.
He looked at me and he unbuttoned his shirt. And he pulled his t-shirt up. And I put my fingers back in those holes. He had lived, but for 29 years, I thought he died. So,
Oh my gosh.
you know, stuff like that gets burned into your mind and it just doesn't go away. And I really can't explain how it feels to know something like that after all those years.
That he lived.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, you guys almost saved each other's lives because you held him until that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was from Tennessee. Come back, got married, had 3 kids, a bunch of grandkids. I was able to meet his family, and 3 years ago I was able to meet his mom and dad. And
oh my gosh, he was able to have a family, and oh my gosh.
And his mom was just a little bitty thing, and she sat there. I sat in her house and I sat on the couch. And she would hold my hand and slap my arm and hold my hand and cry. And I said to her, "What are you crying about?" She goes, "I never thought I'd ever meet the day or see the day that I would meet the guy that saved his life."
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is.
And almost, to have that privilege to experience that. I mean, not many people get that opportunity.
No, they don't.
Wow. And is he still living today?
No, he passed away 2 years ago.
Did he really?
Passed away from cancer.
Oh.
But
He had that good life though because of that. Oh my gosh.
yes, he did.
What a story. What a story. Do you think about that a lot?
About it every day.
Really?
Yeah.
Does it seem like yesterday that it happened?
I still can smell him. I still can feel him shaking underneath my hands when I had my hands in his chest. And
Wow.
I still remember the first time I seen him after we got back in. And so yeah, it'll never go away. It's impossible to ever lose stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's probably what you wasn't looking for when you asked if I ever.
Well, some people are okay with sharing, some are not. But anytime anybody does, I feel privileged and honored that you're okay with sharing it with me, because some people aren't ready to. Sometimes it takes a while. But for some people, it's their form of healing too.
Yes, it is.
For some people, it's not talking, and they cope other ways. So for some people, it's this, and I feel privileged to be a part of that.
It was the hardest thing I ever had to do, was to go into that very first reunion I went into to see these guys and to know that he was there. And it was just a fantastic feeling.
Oh my gosh.
It's just amazing. And there's other stories in my company of like that, but Jesse Hill and my story is probably the best well known of Charlie Company 5th and 46th that there ever is and ever will be. There's it's just talked about and it's been written. It's I'm holding up a book here called Our War. That's the history and the sacrifices of the infantry battalion in the Vietnam War. And that was written by one of the guys in the 5th to the 46th. And the story I just relayed is in there.
Really?
Yes. All the little yellow tags that you see tagged on there is incidences that relate to me or relate to my company. I mean, when I say my company, the guys that's right with me, the guys that I was there when this happened.
Okay.
To them.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
I'll let you take copies of that if you want to.
Yes.
You can.
Definitely. Now, did they contact you when they were writing this book, like to get any specifics?
The author, Dave Taylor, is from Medina, Ohio.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. And so I'd met Dave through the Americal reunions. And Dave had heard about my story. Mm-hmm. And so we'd interviewed over in Ashland, Ohio.
Okay.
We'd met halfway between. And so he is, and other than that, he has either contacted everybody by phone or per email or, with the different things with that happening.
Okay. Wow. What a nice book. Yeah, I'm gonna have to check this out. Cool. This would be helpful. Now, can you talk a little bit about, you said your company used to have Vietnamese children be interpreters, or what was their purpose for you?
We had young kids. I think the youngest one, if I remember right, was 9, and the oldest one might have been 14, and they traveled with our company in the bush. They dressed in camouflage clothes. They carried M16 rifles. They ate with us, they slept with us, they fought with us. And they were our interpreters if we ended up capturing some VC or NVA, that they would talk to them, or if we went into a village, they would talk to the villagers, and from what our company commander or officers wanted to say to the villagers.
Okay.
And there was a bounty on their head. I mean, it was like a 12-year-old kid who was walking around with a target onto him because the VC didn't want him there, so they would shoot at him, try to kill him. We lost one. I can't remember exactly when it was, or I can't relate to the story on it, But it was very. When I first saw him, I thought, well, what's this? I mean, because I always heard that the Vietnamese were smaller, but these were just little kids.
Yeah.
Of course,
right.
I was 19 and they were, 12 and 13. So, but still, I mean, I was a lean, mean soldier, ready to go, and all of a sudden, got these kids over here and they had no time frame. They would have been in the company for some of them, a year, 2 years. It's not like they just went to war for a month. They were there for the duration of it.
Wow.
And so every now and then we would circle around and go back to where their village was, where they come from, so that they could spend time with their family. Well, we did a stand down, but other than that, they were with us 24/7. And of course, what was really comical in today's aspect was they didn't, instead of playing video games, they cleaned their M16s.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Instead of saying, Mom, what's for supper, they fixed their own.
Yeah, and they opened a can and...
Yeah. They were, they were 25-year-old men in a 12-year-old body.
Talk about growing up fast. Wow.
Yep. I don't think they went from babyhood to adulthood.
Didn't have their endless...
And there was no childhood.
Wow.
So when we the American soldier say that we spent our youth in Vietnam fighting, which is true, and but when you look at the Vietnamese kids that fought with us, they never had any youth, but they didn't know anything but that.
But yeah, that's true.
And it's still kind of going on today. But unless you've been there and seen it, you can't relate to it.
Yeah. Wow.
And there's a lot of Vietnam veterans who, when I speak of the Vietnam veterans, are the boots on the ground veterans, not the Vietnam era veterans, but the boots on the ground veterans who never seen the Vietnamese interpreters, because they would be, which was an important job too, they would be the cooks in the rear or the truck mechanics or something like that.
Okay.
So they never was in the bush. They never was out there doing the close combat to see what these kids could be doing. And they just thought that they were probably never. I've never talked to anybody who was worked in the rear all the time to ask them if they knew about the Vietnamese kids as our interpreters.
Yeah.
And but I don't think so. I don't think that the Navy and the Air Force and the Coast Guard and the Marines and the Army, not everybody fought out in the combat. There was only like about 10% of them was out in the combat. The other 9%, to make 100% of the team, the other 9% were back here doing mechanical work or
Like
hospital
supportive
work.
Services.
Yeah, supportive
kind
stuff.
Kind of the infrastructure.
Uh-huh,
Wow.
exactly.
Huh. Yeah, I knew the percentage was probably really low of actual, combat infantry stuff. Did you guys have any downtime while you were over there? And if you did, what did you guys do to occupy? Or were you able to go into town? Did you guys do that kind of stuff or anything like
Most
that?
normally when we come back from the bush for our 2 days or maybe 3 days downtime was, number one was on the priority, was to basically get drunk and try to forget. But we also had other training we had to do while we were back.
Oh, okay.
And at that time is when we had to go through all of our equipment, make sure everything was the way it was supposed to be, the way it was working, clean our, make sure all of our weapons were clean, get ourselves resupplied, get a shower in, and get ourselves a haircut if necessary, shave. And because we didn't shave every day, a lot of us didn't have anything to shave.
Yeah.
And there's no way to bathe every day. And so sometimes you're out there for 7 days straight and you brush your teeth, that's about it. So when you come back, to do a shower, which was a good top priority, of actually get an army cot, which is harder than Dickens, but it's better than sleeping on the ground. So you could actually get some sleep if you could sleep. And so that was our downtime. And we went to the PX and we wrote letters home and played cards, or just kind of like, laid there and wondered what was next.
Okay. So how long were you over in Vietnam? Did you do the 9 months?
I did almost 16 months.
Okay. Excuse me.
I went from July 9th of 1970 to September 22nd of 1971.
Okay. Anything, I guess, any other, incidences, or I don't want to call them stories, or memories from over there that I didn't ask you about?
I had like three different tours into one tour.
Okay.
I had a tour in the infantry, which I've spoke of. Then I was on fire bases. I was on different fire bases. I stayed as a radio operator my whole entire time. And so on the fire bases, I was the one who got from the infantry RTO would call back to the fire base. The fire base RTO would relay it to fire directional control.
Okay.
They would relay it to the artillery guns, and the artillery guns would shoot it out. So I was on the fire base for about 4 different fire bases that I stayed on. And that was 12 hours on, 12 hours off, 7 days a week. And so it was, I don't know which one was really best, because you was being shot at no matter where. Except on the fire bases, a lot of times you were sitting inside a tin box inside the heat.
True.
So it was really extremely hot. And then on my third leg, I was assigned to live in Quang Nai, which is a Vietnamese city south of Chu Lai. And I lived with the Vietnamese on one of their bases. And there was some other Americans there, but I was in charge of a radio unit then. And so it was the same thing, 12 hours on, 12 hours off, or 8 on, 8 off, and just sat and monitored the radios. There wasn't a whole lot of activity going on. But I had a bed to sleep in, I had a sheet, I had 3 meals a day. I had a shower. But my biggest thing I remember about living with the Vietnamese was that once a day, and we had to take turns doing this, we would take the Jeep and we'd take the little trailer that went behind the Jeep, and we'd put the 55-gallon barrels on the back of it, that when you got done eating, if you didn't eat everything, if you didn't eat all your supper, you just scrape it off into this 55-gallon barrel.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of Vietnamese on the base with it, or it was their base, so there was a lot of them there, but we had workers that would help us. They would load up the 55-gallon barrels in the back of this trailer, and then the driver, which would have been myself, and some of the other Vietnamese would drive down through the city to the river and dump it in the river.
Really?
And it never really made it to the river because we'd go like to the river bed and would pull in there and was just supposed to take the barrels and dump it. And to see the people, the older people, the men, the women, the children, coming with, they had little buckets that would look like steel coffee cans, like what we know now, like a pound can of coffee,
Mm-hmm.
with a bail on it and a lid. And they would pick up, if you had eggs in the morning, you didn't eat all your eggs, they'd scoop the eggs up and they'd put it inside there. And I'd seen them already, like when we'd dump it,
Mm-hmm.
and there would be the napkins or plastic forks or, you know, the trash, whatever would be in there, half-eaten sandwiches. I'd see them pick it up and eat it. And they would fight for it. They would fight for the food that was in there. They were that hungry and that poor that they, and it wasn't, it's hard to tell the age of Vietnamese
Mm-hmm.
because of the weather and the climate, and but they were in their 60s down to 5 and 6 year old kids.
Really?
Would just be coming in and going through our garbage and taking the food out.
Really?
And putting it in the bucket and then taking it home. And so if you had steak and there was a piece of steak left there with the bone on it, they would take that. And it was just, first time I saw that, and I'd been in country for probably a year, and I thought I'd seen it all.
When you saw that.
But I'd never seen it all until I saw this. And it wasn't just once, it was every day or every time that we took the barrels down to dump it, that they would be there. Sometimes we wouldn't even get it off the Jeep.
They would just be swarming you.
The scavengers would be there to take the barrels off.
Mm-hmm.
We had our workers that
Mm-hmm.
helped load it. They would go with us. And the driver, which was the American soldier, and the scavengers, just giving it a name like that, would be the ones that come in and they'd be going through the barrels, just taking the stuff. And so that was really mind-boggling, I guess you could say.
Wow.
And so it's just, like I said, you thought you'd seen it all until you experienced some other things.
Did you ever receive any injuries while you were over there?
When Jesse stood in front of me and I turned around and I looked over the scenery,
Mm-hmm.
because Vietnam is very beautiful. I mean, it has a lot of pretty things to look at. When he took that chest full of shrapnel, I took one small piece in my right back,
Mm-hmm.
or my left shoulder. And what was really strange about this thing, about that mine incident, was we could only get one helicopter in at a time. So we started taking off the wounded because of the size of the mountaintop. We could
Mhm.
only land one at a time.
Okay.
So we started taking the wounded out, and then the dead, and then started evacuating the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
And being that I was new into this, I turned around and looked, and there was 6 of us that was left,
Mm-hmm.
waiting for the next helicopter. And I never thought I would ever hear this from the United States government. We can't come back. We can't come back. You guys spend the night and good luck to you.
What?
And we were left behind.
Shut up. Oh my God.
Myself, the medic, a fellow by the name of Dave Hammond, and 4 others that we can't fill the names in with. You know, Ed Bain was the medic. And I said to him, I said, after they said that, we did a small perimeter of 7 of us, everybody looking down over top of the edge, and I was so new I didn't know what to do as far as calling in artillery or figuring anything out. I had the radio, that was it. And I said to Doc, I said, Doc, I said, my shoulder's burning. And he says, well, let me look. He says, why? He says, you're bleeding. He says, there's a piece of shrapnel in there. He says, I think I can get it out. So he dug it out. And he says, I'll take care of the paperwork, he says, if we get back. Because most normally, when an incident like that happens, the VC will come to the top of the hill and search around for survivors or whatever. The only thing that we were thinking, that there were so many helicopters coming in that they thought that we all were gone. We didn't cook, we didn't eat, we didn't move, we sat still until daylight, waiting for the next helicopter. The helicopter never came. They called us back and they told us to walk in. So we had to walk back down that mountain and walk to a fire base.
Just the 70.
Yes. And so when we got back to the fire base, which we were happy to get back, then we found out that there was some left over. Then we learned how many was actually killed. Some of them that was wounded were gone and we never saw them again. And so Doc started doing his paperwork. And I'm not beholding it against him at all, but he never filled out the paperwork for me for my Purple Heart.
Really?
And because he had so much other paperwork to do, and I never questioned it, I never pushed it. I says, you know, would you do this? Would you fill it out? Would you fill it out? And I finally found Doc about 6 months ago.
Really?
And he lived in Arlington, Texas. And so I wrote him a letter to send to him to ask him if he could verify if he remembered pulling the shrapnel out of my back. And he had a heart attack and died.
Oh my gosh.
So, in answer to your question, yes, I was wounded, but is it on my DD-214?
Yeah.
No.
It's not documented though.
No, it's in my mind, but that's beside the point, And I consider myself lucky to be alive.
Yes.
Instead of, worrying too much about having a Purple Heart. I'm still here able to do this interview.
Yeah.
And so it's
Huh. Okay. Do you remember when you got the news that you were going back to the States?
I knew about the time because I'd extended to stay in Vietnam so I could get out early.
Oh, okay.
So I had a date that was already given to me that
Oh, really?
I was going to be leaving I had to leave Vietnam.
Okay.
I had to leave. And I was living in Quang Ngai. And so when my time come up, I knew I had about 7 days left.
Mm-hmm.
And my replacement had come in so I could show him what to do. And then I left and went back to Chulai and started processing out. And then caught a plane and flew to Cam Bay. No, to Benoit. Yeah, Benoit, not Cam Bay. And there was a 727 waiting for us, which we always called the Freedom Bird. And so processed out and started up them steps and got in there and sat down, and it seemed like the flight was forever to get back. But when the plane left the ground, when it picked up and it flew out, I mean, everybody just started screaming and, you know, hooray. And, you know, some of us was going to be out of the Army soon, and some of us was going back and process and go stateside duty, and some of them even went to Germany, but they were done, you know, in Vietnam. And I was, we were heading to Fort Lewis, Washington, and that was, I got there and there was a big sign out there that says, "Your last stop before becoming a civilian." And I says, wow. And I says, I'm almost done.
Wow.
Almost.
Almost.
You know, I made it back to the States.
Was there ever, I mean, I'm sure there was numerous times, but times when you thought you weren't going to make it home?
Oh, yeah. A lot of times I thought, I was flying in a helicopter and the guy beside me got shot through the shoulder. And we were only about 3 inches apart. And I went to lean over and help a guy up on a rice paddy. Like this here, guy shot across my shoulder and hit him in the chest. And there's been a lot of extremely close calls. And I have a fear of water, and we had to cross a river, a raging river. When it says raging, it was really going quickly, and they had a rope from one side to the other. It almost seemed like a training exercise, but this was for real. Started across the rope, and I went underwater.
Oh my God.
And the water was pulling us away. We could only do one at a time because of the rope. And so it was a hand over hand thing like this here with the water above my head. And I thought, man, you know.
That's how you're going to go over
Yeah.
here.
So I'm just, you know, kept pulling, and I come up. And when I come up, and I wear glasses, and I had glasses on over there was nobody in front of me. I didn't have any idea where anybody was at. And because when they got off,
Oh my God.
they kept on going up the trail. And there was guys behind me. So now I'm thinking to myself, I says, I can't see through my water-soaked glasses. And which way did it go? And so what if I step on a landmine? Because you're always worrying about stepping on a landmine or tripping on something. And now I'm thinking, you know, if I had to do any shooting, I'm like shooting through water spots on my glasses, and there's nothing dry on me. I'm soaked to the bone to dry them off. And I'm thinking, finally I saw one of the guy that was in front of me I finally caught a glimpse of where he was at, and so I beat feet that direction and try to shake the water off of your glasses, and then pretty soon it dries. Now you got water spots all over your glasses. And so it's just, it was not a fun play. I mean, it was just, many times I thought the same thing. I says, God, if it's your will, take me home. If it's your will, take me home. And, so when he showed me the power that he had, what he did with Jesse and myself, and he took Jesse home, and Jesse lived to serve God all of his life up until I think about 6 months before Jesse died. He still was mowing the grass at the church.
Aww.
And he says, I owe it to the Lord, he says, and he brought me home, he says, and I will, as long as I can, take care of his house.
Aww.
And so anybody who went over there and says that, I'm the toughest guy out here, and I'm not scared, or I'm fearless, I mean, that's a fool, and that's Hollywood. I mean, you're scared all the time, and you do a lot of praying. The guy who says, I never prayed, he's just lying to somebody, because you can see him writing, so God, give me the opportunity. You've already asked God to help you do something.
Oh yeah.
So yes, you prayed, and you asked, and you hoped, and God answered a lot of your prayers.
Brought you home.
Mm-hmm.
So after you got back in the States, you were pretty much done? You went through processing to get out?
I got back to Fort Lewis, Washington. They brought us in. They always gave me that big, huge meal. Well, I think I got back 2 o'clock in the morning. And so I was able to eat. And the next day, they processed us out. And I left, that night or something. I was able to secure a flight from Fort Lewis to Portland, Oregon. From Portland, Oregon, I caught a flight to Chicago, and from Chicago back to Cleveland. And it was kind of strange, because from Portland coming back, I remember the plane wasn't full. And when I walked in to the plane, I wanted to sit back in the corner. And so I said to the stewardess, I said, can I sit over here? She goes, you sit wherever you're comfortable at. And so I sat back there, and she come by and she says, where'd you come? She says, did you just get back? I says, yeah. She goes, you sit there and go to sleep. I'll watch you. And I'll let you know when we get to Chicago. And so I didn't hear anything. I fell asleep. It was probably the first good sound sleep I'd had in a long time. And the plane got ready to come down. And when it was getting ready to come down, and it wasn't her flight, her first flight, because she knew better. She went up, she says, Sergeant, and just like that, I was wide awake. I said, what? She goes, we're getting ready to land. And she was 2 feet away from me.
Knew the sound and like the jostling.
Yeah,
probably.
She knew better to touch me, or
that is so true.
Because, she just knew better. And so then Well, it's just like now we're sitting in this room and I can see the door because my back's to the wall. You know, I mean.
That's what I figured.
You know, people don't. We go to a restaurant now, and I gotta sit with my back to the corner so I can see the crowd. And it's been 44 years, and I still do that. And you know, if we go in someplace, I'll ask with another couple or something like that, I gotta sit there because I can't sit with my back to the center of the room. And it's built in. It's just one of those things. I just can't let it. Just stays with you. And so when that stewardess, she knew not to touch me, not to get close to me, just to call me. And she knew I would wake up immediately. And which I still do. And then from Chicago I changed planes and then flew to Cleveland. And then and I was home.
Did your mom and dad know you were coming?
My mom and dad and my cousin met me in Cleveland. And so then back to Port Clinton, and I went.
So what'd you do when you got home? Went to school, went back to work?
I had, when I was drafted, I'd worked at U.S. Gypsum, and federal government says if you're drafted, you get that same job back when you come back. You know, the same job, the same machine, the same whatever you were doing. They can't say we're going to put you in another department. No, whatever you left, that's it. And so I went back to U.S. Gypsum and went back to work there for a while, and then I moved off to another factory, and then I working around too many people. I couldn't stand that, so
Really?
I ended up moving into somewhere working more by myself.
Okay.
And so I was with a propane company for a good number of years because I was in a vehicle by myself. And then I worked for the city of Port Clinton, and I worked by myself on one of their shifts and went to the street department. I was only working with a couple different guys. It's not like I was tied up where I was with the whole bunch. And my later years with them before I retired, I was basically worked probably 80% of the time by myself. And because it was just better for me to be working by myself instead of trying to work in a organization and try to get along with a bunch of people. I mean, I'm a team player, but I don't want to be on that team all the time. I need my own.
Now, do you think that has something to do with your military experience, or do you think that was just your personality in general?
Most of it has to do with military, is what it is because of going through flashbacks and anxieties and spurts of anger, and it doesn't work well in a factory or someplace like that, where if you're working by yourself on something and something starts going haywire, you're in control of that. That's
True.
what's going wrong. You can fix it, what's going wrong. But, you know, and if you're working by yourself and you need a few minutes to calm yourself down, it's easier to do that. I know a lot of combat Vietnam veterans who ended up working by themselves, or being truck drivers, over-the-road truck drivers, or being maybe like independent businessmen who had like a home repair service or something like that, because if something went haywire, they were in charge of themselves then. instead of working in a factory or an office or something like that where there's too much stress and pressure. Not saying that there isn't some that do it.
But you're more in control.
More in control of my own environment.
Sounds like my dad. Just everything you're describing. Seriously, it's kind of bizarre. So did you get married, have kids?
I've been married 3 times and I have no kids of my own.
Okay.
And I started going to PTSD classes,
Mm-hmm.
and I found out that I'm not the only weird one out there, because
You're
a lot of guys aren't married. A lot of guys have been married 40 some odd years to the same woman. Some guys have been married 5-6 times. And they say the divorce rate among Vietnam veterans is extremely high. And there again, they say, I'll clarify it, you have your combat veteran and you have your support veteran
Mm-hmm.
that served in Vietnam.
You said the Vietnam era.
And your Vietnam era veteran is so you almost have like 3 different ones.
Okay.
Your combat Vietnam veteran, your support Vietnam veteran, and your Vietnam era veteran.
Okay.
And they say the divorce rate among the combat Vietnam veteran is higher than all the rest of them put together, because a lot of them just never got married, or they couldn't stay married, and and it's hard to describe. No, I'd never be able to. I'm still working on a perspective in my own mind as to why, but it just says,
I mean, honestly, it makes sense to me, because my mom and dad got divorced 30 years after they were married. They've been married 30 years, so they got divorced when I was in college. And I think that had a lot to do with it. My mom didn't know how to deal with it, or how, my dad, so I totally understand. I mean, from that perspective, I know it's true, because I know that had a lot to do with it.
Some of us are better off by themselves, and at least that's what some of us think until it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's not, and then you don't know what to do, and it's a big factor to look upon your exes and your current ones.
Mm-hmm.
That they put up with a lot from the Vietnam veteran. And I'm not saying that World War II and Korea and all the rest of them never had your problems too.
Mm-mm.
But I'm more involved and more in tune with what's going on with the Vietnam veteran ones. And I'm not saying that the new ones now, the OEIF,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not having their problems, because I know that they are too. But it just seems, from the ones that I can relate to,
Exactly.
are having their problems. And some of them have been married for a long time. Some of them are happy.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, you only see them when they're happy. Is there sadness among them when they're not around? Or is there arguments? I mean, it's not a bed of roses.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody any woman who marries a veteran, a combat veteran, there should be a class for them before you get married, to know that there's issues that could come up.
I think that's a great idea.
And I hit my wife 2 months ago. And it was at nighttime. But I was nightmaring. I saw somebody coming in and grabbed her. And when he grabbed her, this was all in my head, but when he grabbed her, I reacted. And when he reacted, I went over and I hit her. But as I was coming down, I woke up.
Oh my God.
But I couldn't stop.
Yeah, you couldn't take that back.
It wasn't a full force. You know, it was like a...
Yeah.
So I went back to sleep. And next morning, got up. She goes, "What happened last night?" I was like, "What do you mean?" She says, "Why'd you hit me?" I says, "Wasn't me." Says, "Yes, it was." Well, I was nightmaring. And I reacted the way that I was trained to react. And it's and I've talked to other Vietnam veterans, combat veterans, who have done the same thing, who you know, hit their wives in the middle of the night, or and then they wake up, and then it's all inside their head, and they end up then crying, and then they're angry with themselves, and then they're upset, and even though that the wife says, "No, that's okay, that's fine," you know, they still, it's in their head that they've messed up again. And so it doesn't mean if they have been drinking and were drunk or cold sober or never had anything to drink, it's in there. It's in their head to react like that.
And they can't control it.
And then what's in my head after doing something like that just tears on me and you know, it just makes you come unglued sometimes. You know, it just makes your heart break to know that you're still violent, and you know, so you just want to go sit in a corner someplace or be away from people. And which brings right back like to a work thing. Could you imagine what it'd be like if you was working someplace and somebody come up behind you and they said something and you turn around and you hit them because they scared you?
But it's just...
But how is your company that you're working for going to take that, you know? They're going to say, "Well, you hit John over
You're
here,
violent.
you know, and you knocked him down, you know," and then you get, "Well, I'm sorry, John, I'm sorry." No, you know, you're fine, you know, you're out of here.
Sorry.
Where if you're working by yourself in an environment by yourself, or maybe just with one or two guys, you know, that's what I ended up with. I was worked maybe one or two guys. It wasn't too bad. But if you worked like at Ford Motor Company, where there's all kinds of people going around you, you know, you could really, you know, it just could dwell on you. You know, you could come unglued and really do bad things. And so that's why that I chose the career that I chose, is to work, you know, by myself as much as possible and be by myself as much as possible, so that I won't have emotional outbursts on people.
It's an interesting perspective on that. I'll never forget my dad. He fell asleep in the chair one day, taking a nap or something, and he had the TV on something that I didn't want to watch, so I was like, "I'm gonna go get that remote." Sitting on his lap, I went to go grab that sucker. He freaking flew out of that chair. I screamed. I threw the remote like halfway across the room. He's like, "Don't do that." I'm like, "Okay." Because like you said, it's that boom, boom. Like he just felt that little movement and he flipped out. He didn't, you know, swing at me or anything, but like he jumped up ready to fight because he said it's ingrained in you. Oh my God. So I told you that. I'm like, I never ever do that. I won't do it again. So I get it. it doesn't leave you. So, well, are you in any veteran organizations like VFW, American Legion, anything like that?
I belong to the VFW and
Okay.
American Legion
Okay.
and the vets.
Okay. I knew somebody else that was, remember that too. You think it was a necessary war? Looking back at it.
Well, that's a hard one. We were winning when I left. And are wars necessary? Well, I don't know. It states in the Bible it'll be wars and rumors of wars until the end of time.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think we'll ever be out of a war, period. I think we'll always have conflicts of interest and, try to do whatever we can do.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of lives lost, and we really didn't seem like we gained a whole lot. And what lives of the 58,000 that died over there,
Mm-hmm.
the war is still being fought, and veterans' heads now. And so I think at the time that it probably got started, they thought that it was going to do some good.
Mm-hmm.
But when we left in '75 and Saigon fell and the North Vietnamese took it over, we didn't accomplish what we wanted to accomplish. It just didn't. And what was the accomplishment supposed to be? I don't think anybody even knows today. What was it supposed to be? What was our goal?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't stop anything, and so I don't know.
What are your feelings on? I mean, maybe you were part of this before you went over, but as far as the protesting on the home front, like when you came back, did you experience any of that in a negative way?
When I come back, I had like 6 weeks before I had to go back to work.
Okay.
And so I'd sold my car before I went to Vietnam, because just in case I didn't want it to be a hindrance or one of those things that Mom, we can't get rid of that car because it's his.
Yeah.
So I was sitting uptown one night, and it wasn't really late, and that I didn't think it was late, maybe 10 o'clock at night, something like that. I'm sitting on the corner of 2nd and Madison,
Mm-hmm.
just watching the traffic. And I saw a cop go by, and went down, back up and around, pulled up like this. And he goes, "What are you doing?" I was just sitting there watching traffic go by. He goes, "Why?" I says, "Well, I just got back from Vietnam." I says, "I'm just sitting there watching traffic go by." He says, "Go someplace else and watch the traffic go by. Not here." Okay, so I left. And about a week later, I was with a friend of mine. We was at a local bar, and I was drinking root beer, and he was drinking beer. And it got to be about 1 o'clock. The barmaid come up, and she looked at me and says, "How old are you?" I says, 20. She says, "Took my root beer and told me to get out." I says, "Get out?" I said, I just got back from a tour in Vietnam." She says, "I don't care. Get out. You can't be in here. You're too young." So I said to my friend, I says, "Well, finish your beer." I says, I was driving. I says, "I'll wait for you outside." And so I left. I mean, I couldn't even sit in an establishment and drink a root beer. And it wasn't one of those things that I was well, I'm sorry, that you had to go, but the rules is,
Mm-hmm.
just get out. And so I had my Army greens on my dress coat, and I went to a local restaurant, and I was sitting in there. And you remember now, Port Clinton's only got about 6,000 people.
Yeah.
And I was sitting in this restaurant, and a guy come in and he says, "Where'd you get the coat at?" I said, "Well, it's mine." I said, "I just got back from Vietnam about 3 weeks ago." "How many babies you kill?" And I got up and I walked out. And so I went back to work again. And I just never went back into town. I just went to work and went home. And it took a long time before I could ever, and I put all my stuff away. And I never declared myself ever being, "Well, where you been?" "Oh, I've been around."
Yeah.
It was one of those things that I wasn't treated good, and a lot of the Vietnam veterans today are still have that problem in their head. Although now it's cool to see a Vietnam veteran say, "Well, welcome home," and stuff like that. Well, the problem of it is it's taken 40 some odd years.
Mm-hmm.
And resentment that we built 40 years ago
Mm-hmm.
is still there. And a lot of guys are still in the closet. They won't come out.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got some of them, who are overboard. And then you got some guys who, like myself, who decide, if I can help somebody by doing something like this, I've accomplished something.
That's right.
And so last year, the governor signed in as March 29th as Welcome Home Vietnam Era Veteran Day. Well, he signed it in the first week of March.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of hard to put together anything in 3 weeks.
Right.
So I decided, and I got a hold of one of the girls at the Veteran Service Office, and she's from Fremont, Jenny Beeler, and
How old is she?
about 28.
I went to school with Jenny Beeler, but I'm like 32, so maybe she's. But the name sounded familiar.
Maybe she's older.
Yeah, anyways, okay.
Well, she's Army.
Yes, that is her.
And she was in.
Yeah,
Yep.
I know her. I mean, I went to school with her, so yeah. I mean, we weren't like friends, but yeah, acquaintances, and yeah.
She's overseas.
Is she? Oh.
Or was, I should
Okay.
say. She's out. She works at the Veteran Service Office in Navajo County.
Really?
So I called her up and I said, "I want to do something. Why don't you help me?"
Mm-hmm.
She goes, "What's that?" Says, "I want to do a Welcome Home Vietnam Veteran Day on 2014. She goes, "Okay." So between her and myself, and then we picked a committee,
Mm-hmm.
we went through and started this, and we had our very first Ottawa County Welcome Home Vietnam Era Veteran Day.
How neat.
And it was super great. I mean,
That's awesome.
Jenny and I have become extremely good friends, not just an acquaintance,
Mm-hmm.
but we've become good friends, good co-workers together on this, and brother and sister because of the military.
Nice.
And so that was that was one of the things that we started doing, and I thought, if I can do this and get and it's open to everybody, it's open to any Vietnam veteran
That's neat.
era period, if they can come to it, that if we can get this going and get other veterans out there and says, wow, I never knew, and we had a lot of it got mind-boggling. We couldn't even keep track of how many people came to this. We didn't have they were just swarming in the doors, so we couldn't keep track of who all was there. We had probably 300-400 people that come in, and not everybody was a veteran. It was like, husband and wife and the kids and grandkids and the moms and whatever, whoever wanted to come, just come to this. And so the book here that I had, our award, Dave Taylor was our guest speaker. I called him up and I said to him, I says, Dave, what are you doing on this date? And he goes, I don't know. Why? I says, would you be my guest speaker at the very first Ottawa County Welcome Home Vietnam Era Veterans Day? He says, absolutely. I'll be there.
That's awesome.
And so he came and did that. And it's turned into a passion for me. I made a commitment, and Jenny made a commitment to do it for 5 years. The other people that's on the committee are veterans also.
Okay.
And I said to him, I says, I made the commitment, God willing, I says, that I'm going to do this for 5 years. I says, and when you guys were asked to be on it, if you don't want to be on it anymore, that's fine and dandy. I sure do appreciate the time you put in. If you stay with me for the whole 5 years, I says, I appreciate the time. If we go 6 years or 7 years, I says, that's not very yet.
Exceeded
I says,
expectations.
but you're not expected to stay any longer. But Jenny and I will be here for the next 5 years doing this.
That's awesome.
I says, unless something drastically happens. And I look at this year, we're moving from the Ottawa County Fairgrounds, we're moving to Camp Perry because it's a bigger area and we can have more people and it's going to be a lot nicer, and we're overly excited about it. And we meet once a month, the committee does, to go over this stuff, and it's helping me in a way that's people don't understand, but I'm reaching out to other veterans who need, if they want to come out of that closet, if they want to be heard, if they want to be seen as a Vietnam veteran, now's the time that they can come out, that there's somebody out here to welcome them, a heartfelt welcome instead of just one of those things. And I've noticed lately, in the past 2 years, a lot more people are wearing the Vietnam veteran hats and wearing them to the malls or to garage sales or to wherever you go to, and of course I didn't wear one today, but I have one in my truck, so I do it too, and a lot of people come up and they say, oh, Vietnam veteran, welcome home. And a lot of other plates, if you have plates on there, says Vietnam veterans, and realizing that there's World War II in Korea, and the Persian and all the rest of the military plates, but I pay more attention to the Vietnam veteran ones, and to see them go by. And sometimes if you blow the horn and you go by and you look in the mirror, you'll see like a guy maybe flash his lights, because he looked at your license plate, and You know, at first he's probably thinking, why is he blowing his horn at me? I'm doing okay, you know. And then you get by, and then all of a sudden you see it as another Vietnam veteran that passed you, you know, and then you could maybe hear a horn blow or a hand wave or something like that, you know. So there's always something to do to help the veteran. And Jenny and myself and the committee, last year we had a lot of people come up and thank us. Thanks for doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for putting this on, you know, and that meant a lot, but we didn't do it for that. We didn't do it for the self-recognition.
Exactly.
You know, but when they come up and say it, you know, we do appreciate that too.
Yeah,
you know.
it just shows you how much needed it is.
Right.
That's nice. Well, if you're, you know, I don't know what you guys do at the program, but I mean, if I can help in any way with this, I mean, I'd be more than willing to come up and, you know, I don't know what you guys do, like I said, but, you know, set a table up. I can bring laptop, I can show videos of these, you know, if people are ready to tell their stories too. I'd be more than willing to come up and set a program up or do something or talk about it for 10 minutes, explain the program. Definitely do something like that. We'd go from there too.
Be careful what you ask for, Julie, because you just may get on my speed
Well,
dial.
well, as soon as you said something about your passion, I told my boss, I said, I think I've found my passion doing this. I don't know if it's something I can give back to my dad. So that's why I do it, I think.
Yeah.
So, no, I mean, anything we can do to help, it's a good thing. It needs to be done, and if we don't do it now, who's going to do it? So,
yep.
That's why I do it.
Yep. Who's going to do it? Because the World War II, the Korean veterans, they're going every day, and so is the Vietnam veterans.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And people, like the Library of Congress, that usually this goes through. I don't catalog through Library of Congress because they want original materials. They won't take like scans of your photos or something. I'm like these guys are dying off, and if I can get it now and it's a scan, I don't care. It's still searchable. People can still learn from it. Their story is still out there. So that's why I do it this way. I switched it up and made it my own.
Oh, good.
So I'm going to do it like this.
Good.
So like I said, I always thank my boss for, do you want to do this? I said, yep, and I ran with it. And
Yeah.
so that's why we do it. So yeah, no, keep me in mind. We'll go from there. Well, on that note, is there anything we didn't ask or anything you want to add before we close?
No, not that I can think
I think
of.
that
I
was-
sure do appreciate this
Oh my
opportunity to get together and meet with you and
Definitely, it's an honor for me.
to tell some stories and
Yeah,
do some enlightening and
definitely. Good.
yes.
Well, we'll end right there.